That is the truth. We are free and unlimited right now. And for some reason, I woke up this morning with my throat a little bit ish. So please, maybe it's the spring and the pollen, but I'll take it. I love the spring. So if that's the reason, thank you. My name is Cynthia Luck-Carr, and I'm a practitioner with Centers for Spiritual Living. Welcome on this Mother's Day Sunday, and welcome to live streamers. Let's go ahead and settle in. My job is to invoke us. So let's feel the ground beneath you. Feel your chair supporting you. Take a couple nice deep breaths. As we gather together on this beautiful day, rainy and sunny and rainy again.
I'm not sure I understand.
I know, it happens. Oh, I love it. Oh my God, thank goodness for humor. I understand. I understand, Siri. That means just be quiet. So back to the chair beneath you.
Back to you, Cynthia.
And take another nice deep breath. And feel your cheeks rounded with that wonderful smile that Siri just gave us. Again, gathering on this beautiful day, this beautiful spring day with that crisp green and gray and white all at once. I recognize the powerful presence of God, the divine source, the all-powerful, always present, creative life force that is the source of all that is. I know that God is here in perfect form, individualized as you, as your life, just as it is as me, my life, and all life on this beautiful planet. It's from this grace-filled place that I give thanks for Rev John and our practitioner team, our musicians, R.L. and Max, Leadership Council, present, past, and future, our children's program teachers, thriving today, our technicians, and our social hour greeters and volunteers. I give thanks for all those who give financially, and I give a special thank you to each member of this spiritual family who make up who we are as a true center for spiritual living. I bless our time together, and together we say, and so it is. Okay, I pondered this. I was going to do something light and sweet for Mother's Day, but you know me. Going deeper has been a theme, and it seems to be a theme for our planet. And embracing the dark and the light is our theme here. So I decided to do an article from Psychology Today about Mother's Day. So bear with me. And I love the authenticity of it. The sentence that grabbed me and convinced me was, are we edging closer to a time in which performances of perfection are out and authenticity is in? So a little brief aside, too bad Tom's not here because I haven't seen him since he passed his test. But for practitioners, it seems like there's always someone in the cohort that goes through a crisis of some kind, or all of us make some kind of huge change during the 2-year period. And for me, I had a huge thing happen that was involving authenticity. And that same week, I had to write a huge article or paper about authenticity for my practitioner training. So that word is a very special word for me. And I believe that we are our best selves. I love when someone is authentic with me, and I can tell. So be authentic with me. So here we go. The culture is the culture of Mother's Day changing. It's by Dr. Lucy Blake from Psychology Today. On Mother's Day, a commercialized saccharine day in which we are sold images of maternal perfection, many people will feel less than. There will be those whose mothers failed to live up to this idealistic image of selfless dedication and mothers who violated it entirely. There will be mothers who won't receive a card, gifts, or phone calls, just as there will be those who receive gestures that feel empty or rushed. Like many commercialized holidays, feelings of bitterness, resentment, and sadness can linger. It is all too easy to feel like everyone else is having a better, normal experience, and that everyone else is having the kind of day that you should be having. And yet, Mother's Day is changing too. There are social media posts where people acknowledge those who don't have active relationships with their mothers due to bereavement or estrangement. Companies offering opt-out if you don't want to continually get their sale message about Mother's Day. Even the Disney film Encanto encouraged children to explore the cracks in their family relationships, rather than portray them out to the world as being perfect. Are we edging closer to a time in which performances of perfection are out and authenticity is in? And here's where I start paraphrasing. To this, she says, she would argue not yet. And I say slowly, yes, we are edging there. Many kinds of motherhood are sidelined, like stepmothers and single mothers and adoptive mothers and foster mothers and birth mothers and dads who are the only parent. So they're the mothers too. Mothers who have mental or physical issues, mothers who require care, mothers who are abusive. So this is kind of one of those days, right? To all of those mothers, I say thank you. And to all of you who have mother roles, I say thank you. I say, I know you aren't perfect. I guess I'm saying it to myself too. And I know you are perfectly you. So this reminds me of that Hawaiian educational, or not educational, what is it? It's a phrase or a teaching, and it's called let me just say it. Ho'oponopono. Have you heard that before? Ho'oponopono, and it basically means bring life back to balance. And they use it as a tool for reconciliation and a tool to give yourself forgiveness. So not just for yourself, but also for others. And the first step is to recognize that there's something wrong. And so it starts with, I'm sorry. And then it says, please forgive me. And so that is, I'm sorry that this has happened. I'm sorry that I've done anything. If I have done anything, I recognize that. And please forgive me for anything that I have done. And thank you, and I love you. And so that's the mantra. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And it turns into a mantra, especially if you say it in Hawaiian, ho'oponopono, and you just say it over and over again. Ho'oponopono. Isn't that lovely? I love it. All right, so there you go. So how's that for Mother's Day? And I love that we're doing Embracing the Dark and the Light. And I love flowers, and I love brunch with champagne, and I love gifts of Mother's Day. So don't get me wrong there. You know, it's not about dissing all of you who got cards for your mothers. It's just us remembering us all. And so with that, let's go ahead and do our, I have two of them up here now. Our affirmation for the month. Oh, here it is. No? Is this the right one? Yes. Yay, okay. So it looks like this, and it's in red right here. The affirmation for May, and this is perfect for all of us who are mothers, who have mothers, which is all of us. And I forgot to actually mention that I also did a little exploration into the goddess, mother goddess. I was going to read to you about that. I suggest we all take a re-look at Greek mythology before Homer. It's so beautiful about the mother goddesses. There's 6 or 7 of them that all mean the same, different things, but they're all one. And it reminded me so much of our teaching. So yeah, we could talk in there about it if you want. Okay, so the affirmation for May. I am perfect, whole, and complete as I accept both the light and the shadow of my being and my mother's being and my version of motherhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
A thought or two of the day. It seems like there is an abundance of thought going around. Have you noticed it? It's good. It's eclectic. It's maybe noisy, but here's my collection. So I would love to do a sort of a shameless promo. Caritas Chorale sang a concert last night. We sing again this afternoon at 3 o'clock at the community campus. Max is singing with us. I have my hands waving in the air as though it means something. It's a beautiful collection of contemporary choral pieces with strings. It's a really lovely concert. And somewhere along the way, I thought, who picked all of this music? And then I realized that was me. And that's my job. And I started to look at the lyrics of these pieces, and they are profound. Contemporary writers often look for things that inspire them, and usually they have some weight to it or something that they'd like to sit with for a while. And there are a number of pieces, but the final piece that we sing is called From Earth to Heaven. And it's all about this sort of flow from one to the other. And the writer and the composer both definitely have an opinion about this transition. Me too. And I know nothing about it, except that I have witnessed others make a shift from a plane that I know to some place that I don't really know anything about. You know, for my mom, that was, 13 years ago now. For my dad, it was a long time ago. For others in my life, more recently. I know nothing about what is on the other side of that transition. Just like I don't have any idea about what is that pre-birth thing, what goes on before we land here. But I know this, when it was important for me to have a bit of understanding, a friend of mine went to visit an intuit, a psychic, someone who made some connections, and the words that came back from someone recently transitioned were, and I don't care if this is truth or not, it's more beautiful than you can ever imagine. Okay, good enough for me. Good enough for me as I think about my own future, good enough for me as I think about those who've moved on before me. It is more beautiful than you can ever imagine. Done. I don't need to think any more about that. That works for me. I'll take it. So here's my thought. I have little control. I have no control over what happens after that transition. But I do have control over what happens, not so much on the whole planet, but on my little segment of it. I have control over what happens in my day. And maybe how I don't have any control over how anyone else receives what I put out into the world. That's not on my plate either. But I do have control over what I toss out into the world. I have total control over it. And sometimes that's hard. But if our work around this transition from earth to heaven isn't about what happens after, I wonder if our responsibility, if our challenge, if our quest, isn't that a good word, quest? It means it's something that you might not get right the first time, but you can keep trying, is to find out how we can make things here more beautiful than you could ever imagine. I have a friend, David Schuller. He's on Facebook as Auntie Dash. That's how kind of quirky and crazy and wonderful he is. He is robust and unique and flamboyant and crazy and wacky and a dynamic force in my life for decades. And Auntie Dash does this for 2 minutes every morning. He wakes up and he sits up and out loud he chants for 2 full minutes. I am light, I am love. I spread light, I spread love.
Thank you, R.L. Thank you, Max. Happy Mother's Day to whom that applies to. And it's funny, even as Cynthia pointed out, if we've all been in that role at one point or another. Just to let you know what we were giggling at the beginning of the service. At home.
You just can't let it go, man.
No, I can't. No, it's funny. Someone's phone, who shall be nameless, Barbara. Siri does funny things. And said, what did it say? It says, I don't think I understand. So This has nothing to do with the talk I'm going to give today, but I'm at odds with Alexa at home. And I have trained Alexa to mute when hearing profanities out of my mouth. And especially it was about a month ago at 2 a.m. it started playing Price is Right reruns. So I'm sure Alexa is out to get me because I have an iPhone and I don't associate with Alexa except when I have to in my bathroom. So I'm just saying, it just happens, you know. When you least expect it, messages from beyond, I suppose, but I'm not sure really what the message of Price is Right is at 2 a.m. So anyway. So here we are at Mother's Day. And I'd like to just talk about our parental relationships. I mean, what an interesting concept. Whether you're on which side of it, I've only been on one side of it, having parents, but I'm not a parent. I believe that most parents do the best they can at a particular time, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. But there it is, kind of thing. But I've also heard from different spiritual teachers that we choose our parents, and our parents choose us before. And that could be true. Like I said, I don't claim that anything is true beyond this experience, but it's an interesting concept to say that, boy, we chose this. Or in that, wherever that is, my brothers and sisters coming together says, yeah, they'd be great parents. Eye roll. But when you think of it, to look at, and I don't run for the exits for this, but sometimes the blessings of family, the ones that are obvious and the ones that aren't obvious. We'll be talking a bit about blessings today. And to really look at that our parents and our families have delivered to us, I think, the most significant lessons of our lives. And again, we wouldn't always put them on human judgment on the good category. We think, that's a lesson? You know, why did they serve that thing up to here? But I think many of us, or most of us, the further that some of those things in our families are in the rearview mirror, we can start to see how they work together as lessons to ultimately teach us something, and sometimes difficult lessons. And I look at the lessons of my parents, and it's such a mix. I mean, really such a mix. I don't know who made up these 1950s sitcoms with those families, because I didn't know any of those kind of families growing up. Did you? Did any of you live in one of those? Of course, I used to laugh that they'd always say, like, June Cleaver was like doing housework and pearls and a dress and all that. But actually, my mother did, because their business was next door, and you never knew when someone was coming in. So both my parents, odd. So my father would be always in a three-piece suit. My mother would always be in pearls and a dress, you know, vacuuming. My dad, like, doing the things like, oh, the customer's here, and they go run off. So actually, it kind of looked like the sitcom, even though it wasn't funny on most days. And of course, they owned a mortuary, so that made it even more perverse. But it's interesting to look at this weird mix that I claim is my family, and the lessons I learned from my parents both that I would put in the good category and the really rough, trying to still figure it out category. Don't we both have those categories? I mean, let's just be honest. So regardless of what happened in your family that you landed in on planet Earth, there were some wonderful things that happened. There were. And there were some things that we just have trouble getting over at the same time. I mean, it almost feels like an oil and water. And we're not to just concentrate on the quote-unquote good and ignore the not so good. We're looking at the light and the dark today. You don't want to just say, oh, well, it didn't happen, or it was a million years ago, so we don't have to think about it. If you're still thinking about it, it's a lesson you're still chewing on. So not to be like, ooh, it's like, well, okay, why am I still chewing on this sort of thing? So I look at the lessons of my family. On one hand, I got, especially as a young child, an amazing support and lessons to start off my life. I got the message that I was worthy, that I was smart, that I could do anything that I put my mind to, and it was always the message, you had to work for it. I mean, no one's going to serve it up, but there was always that possibility, and that stuck with me. But on the other side, especially as I got into 3rd and 4th grade, and really as my parents really, I use this word purposely, descended into their addictions and alcoholism, there were some really tough lessons to learn. Lessons that my brother and sister and I think we're still chewing on some of the crumbs of it. I'd like to think we got the main meal chewed on at this point, but there's always still some crumbs there. But here's the irony of it. What I learned as a young child were lessons that helped me get through the latter part of the difficulty with my parents. And it took me a long time to put that together. It's suddenly like, again, are we up there before and like planning what we're going to do here? It says, I know, we're going to give you some great positive things here when you're 6 and 7, and then we're going to be hot messes later on, and you're going to be set up to be able to figure that out. I mean, I guess that's a plan, but I think to some extent to be honest, it wasn't all quote unquote good, and it wasn't quote unquote all bad either, and especially if you have some time in the rearview mirror, and especially if your parents have passed and you can't touch those soft spots anymore that we have, lurking there a little bit, to really think, okay, how did this fit together? How did it set me up to embrace life in a way that I may not have? So, and maybe we won't completely answer those questions, but it's an ongoing dialogue as we look at, I would say, even the shadow self of our families. Because last week we talked about our individual shadows, meaning that part that we don't want to look at, the parts that smart and hurt, that we just want to say, don't look at the man behind the curtain. But we have that as families and as groups and as a nation as well. And here's a little thing, if you have siblings and relatives, it's an interesting way to work things out. We all have our idea of how things unfolded in our families. We all have a story we tell. And we all have the story of, Uncle Harry at that Thanksgiving when he threw the turkey in the trash or something. I mean, we all have the story. And it's like, and especially if Uncle Harry's still alive, don't bring up that particular Thanksgiving. It's the shadow. We don't want to talk about it. But it's interesting if you can come together with family now, especially several years after the fact, and say, well, what do you think happened that day? Where were you when that happened that day? Where were you? And put the stories together. It reminds me of, I think I've mentioned this before, there was a play that really intrigued me in Los Angeles a million years ago, that it took place in a house. I mean, kind of a mansion sort of thing. And it was really an experimental kind of theater thing. You didn't sit in seats. That you followed the players throughout the house. And the only rules was that you couldn't talk to them. So you were like the fly on the wall. So they gave the instructions that you would say, choose your person, and you didn't have to keep with them, but you would go with them and see what they were up to. And intermission was all about coming together with the other audience members and say, well, you followed so-and-so, what were they doing over there? And try to put it together. And I knew some people that were obsessed with this play, and they went like 10 times, some of them, because they followed a different person every time. It says, I've got to put this together. So I followed Mary, now I'm going to follow Joe, sort of thing. But we can do that in our own families and put the story together. It's interesting with a couple things with my brother and sister. And I say, well, that was a mess, wasn't it? So we'll say, yeah, but you didn't see what was happening over here that kind of like set it off. So we can do that with family and friends to see the wholeness of it as well. And not that it was good or bad, but it makes sense somehow. And a lot of stuff that I grew up with now makes sense. It was still a mess, but it makes sense. And I think days like today, we can be honest with that. And so I so appreciate my parents. And I feel so badly for them that they took the path that they did. They never went into recovery. So their lives didn't really end well. But I can honor and respect and cherish them for the totality of it. And I think that's where we all can come in our group shadow, in a sense. But that, of course, it brings us then the larger group shadow. Boy, it's amazing we can even see the sun these days. I mean, when you think of it, we seem to be, in this point in history, just being hit over the head with our collective shadow. And it shows up in so many ways. And I think one of the most obvious is just with gun violence. I remember even a couple of weeks ago, it was a thing on the news about an incident. I was like, oh yeah, that happened a couple days ago. No, it didn't. This was a new one that had happened that day. And it was just like, you can't even keep up with it. And so we always ask, well, what do we do about these sort of things? You know, these larger than life things that just don't make sense. And of course, what is frustrating, but yet has a tinge of truth in it, and then we'll hear people on, politicians say, well, we just need to pray about this. No, we need to do something about it. But there's truth in that to the extent action and consciousness go hand in hand. So part of what I think our lessons today as we're dealing with our group shadow is to first not make decisions out of the level of consciousness that has created this and challenge ourselves to elevate and grow in consciousness and make the decisions from that level of energy. That if we make decisions at oh my God, everything is terrible and I don't know what to do, and let's see, what laws should we pass and what programs should we have and all that, and we all need to do those things at some point, but when we do it from a level of fear and anxiety, it probably is not going to work out too well. But if we can slowly challenge ourselves to elevate to a higher level of consciousness, the decisions we make from there will have a tendency to be more effective. Not necessarily heal overnight, but we will see progress. It's kind of like you don't go shopping when you're hungry. I mean, you don't. Because you will eat a bag of Fritos before you leave the supermarket. You go with a higher state of consciousness, meaning you just had an apple or something, so you're not like driving yourself nuts. So it's the same kind of thing. What is our level of consciousness? And when we say, like, well, what can I do here? So it's not a matter of just praying and hope for the best. It is praying in spiritual practice that I say, I am elevating myself, and then what is mine to do from this? It's, of course, things like voting and getting the vote out and talking to people, but you can't even effectively talk to people if you are on the level of conflict. Like, hey, you should be believing this. That never works. So this week we have a great opportunity to have this conversation as a larger community. I spoke about this a few weeks ago, and we've been having this flyer. You need to come watch this 1-hour documentary with us. That's being hosted primarily by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I've been invited to be part of a clergy discussion afterwards. The Lutheran Church, I think, is involved, the Wood River Jewish community, and I think Emmanuel Church in Haley. I think that's who it is. So we're going to view this together, and Tony Evans is going to be the moderator, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions from the audience. This is important because it initiates community discussion. And not only that, I've been a part of these panels before, and it's been a while. This is something I think has been great for our community that we're just doing again. In fact, we met this last week and says, this is just something that just speaks to people. We want to do this once or twice a year with films. There's just something community building that does that. That in the past, not to say that the past dictates the future, that I have found that in the discussion with the audience and who was ever in the panels, instead of descending into, oh my God, the world's falling apart, we have a tendency to uplift to, there's something that we can do. And part of that is our presence and the belief that something can be done. And to be led from that point. And I think this movie is so great, and so you may not all be familiar with Abraham Joshua Heschel. He is a rabbi, and he was really a giant in the civil rights movement. He got out of Europe right before the Holocaust, having lost most of his family, and walking, arm in arm with Martin Luther King. And as we have discussed this with the clergy, I mean, not like this is a spoiler alert, but this is great as a historical thing, but my comment was it is a documentary about how history repeats itself. That we are still looking at our communal shadow here, trying to make some sense of it. Today, it seems mostly through gun violence. At that time, through different avenues. And so these questions still need to be elevated in consciousness. And it's so interesting when we look at things like this or talk about the civil rights era, the late 50s and the 60s, we somehow get this romanticized view of what it was like. Gee, wouldn't it have been great to be here, because I would have been right out walking across that bridge and singing the song, and then before you knew it, the next day everything was better. No. It was as messy and as dangerous and as violent as what we're facing today. So if you think, gee, if I was back there, I would really make a difference, take that energy and do that now. Because it was just as messy, if not messier. And we delude ourselves into thinking, oh, the time passed. It was, we'll talk about like Martin Luther King and get a flutter in the heart, and gee, it would have been so great to be there. It was messy. I was a child in grade school, and I knew it was messy. And those that were there at that time, you know how messy that it was. It wasn't this lovely romanticized sort of thing. And that's how facing the group shadow actually is. It's messy. Just, again, facing the shadow in our families, that's messy enough. But there's a bigger messy that we're all in the midst now. And so please, unless if you are on a plane somewhere else, be it here. Be at this. It's going to be good for our community. And now that we're kind of connecting again in public again, I think this is the absolute perfect thing for us to do, to come together as communities. So as we look at this, we say, well, how do we shift? What is this energetic shift that you're talking about? This is the difficult thing. Not that it's difficult, but it's something that we have to grow and get over within ourselves. So I know this sounds ridiculous, but we have to learn to use the concept that we teach here of oneness, meaning the divine is in all things already, and use that for the things that we just can't even bear to see and experience. In my blog, I had a quote from a book I'm reading of, where is that? I didn't write it down. Anyways, my mind is going blank. Anyway, it was talking about blessings. And what does that mean? Or to see the divine. Now, when we think of the divine or the blessings, we think of good stuff, don't we? It's a blessing that there's no snow on our lawn. It's a blessing that until today, there was sun shining. You have something amazing happen in your family, and you, first thing, what a blessing. You see the divine right there in that moment and go, oh, this is amazing. But this one line here, before I read the whole quote, it says, a blessing is the placement of God upon the thing you see, and realizing that the thing you see may often be the thing you don't want to see. That we have to be able to see that blessing, not to say, oh, isn't it great that the train crashed? It's saying that the blessing of the divine is within it anyway, and it is our job to find it. And so let me read this larger quote. It says, to understand what a blessing is very important. And a blessing is the placement of God upon the thing you see. If you can imagine this, imagine there is a dark being slithering on the floor. You can run from the dark being, or you can bless the dark being. By blessing the dark being, you bring the light to it. You bring the action of the divine to bear on this very thing, and it transforms in its own way to meet the choice of being blessed. To anoint something in spirit, to perceive it in its own regardless of what it presents, will shift you to the awareness of the divine in all things. When you curse something, you cast it out. What you put us outside the light, you then attach to it. Well, let me just break this down a little bit. So first of all, anything that we judge as bad or the dark or the evil or whatever, in a sense, we give it power. Not that it's like, ooh, power. It's like, it's power within me because I take it on. I'm afraid of this thing. If you were a kid and were afraid of, oh, there's something underneath the bed. There was nothing underneath your bed. But the more fear you put out, you create it as a reality for your existence. It was real to you because you gave it power, this thing that doesn't exist. And the way that you got over it, or hopefully got over the boogie person underneath your bed, is that you realize that, well, it doesn't really exist. And in a sense, in your own way, there's only good or the divine that exists, or at least it's neutral. There's nothing underneath there but dust bunnies. So you no longer give that thing power. So anything that we look in the world now that is disturbing and terrible that we want to get rid of, by, in a sense, saying that it is cast into darkness, gives it power for us. If there's someone or something you are afraid of, you are almost attracting it to you because you are obsessed with giving it power as being bad. So part of our work, as it says, is to give the placement upon the thing that you see, that it's not accepting it for, oh gee, isn't it great that something terrible is happening, to know that the divine is in there somewhere. And to use that to release our fear of it, or our anxiety of it, and in a sense hold it up as something that can be transformed into the truth of what it is. Just like even the concept in the New Testament, for those that were raised in New Testament teachings as I was, like we never got this as kids. Pray for your enemies. It's like, what? So that doesn't mean, I'm praying for my enemy to lose. I'm praying for my enemy to go somewhere else. I've been praying all day. I've been praying for my neighbor to move. That's not what it meant. It means here, a blessing is the placement of the divine upon the thing that you see. Your objective is not, quote unquote, to change it, but it is to energetically recognize the deeper truth for what it is, and that thing or experience has the option of shifting into what it actually is. And the more of us that uphold the presence of the divine in all things creates this power that just expands exponentially, that it's almost the thing that thinks it's evil can't believe that it's evil anymore. So again, it's not that we just sit on our prayer cushions either. It's like, oh, let's just pray the guns away or something. We start there, and we start from that higher consciousness, and then from that consciousness we say, yeah, let's pass this law, or let's do this program, or we do this other thing, but it has to come from that elevated consciousness as opposed to, like I said, the slithering thing, and oh, get away from me, it's under the bed, we're afraid, it's the boogie person. And it's not always on a human level an easy thing to do. But that's how we work through this. And it's really not a Pollyanna white lighter, airy-fairy kind of thing. We do what we have to do in the world to physically heal. But at the same time, we have to do that from a higher state of consciousness, or we just are in a repeating pattern. As this week when I was met with our clergy people or representatives from the different faith communities, the man, I forget his name, I met him for the first time from the Jewish community, and again, he was talking about a concept that I love that Rabbi Robbie taught us. It's about the Jewish directive to heal the world. Boy, that's big. I mean, really thinking, no, I was just going to start with like my bedroom or my bathroom with the mold, you know? But it's like this concept, no, you're actually here to heal the world. And of course, no one person can, quote unquote, heal the world, but the consciousness of us in connection can heal the world. So if nothing else from today, to know that what we have been doing has not been overly effective. Let's just throw that out. There has been things that are effective, but as we're chasing our tail, oh, they're terrible, look at them, look at that horrible politician, and look at this law that passed, our just seeing the darkness in that has not worked. What does work is the elevation. And it's interesting note, it's all one big book. I don't even know what the teachers said which or that or what book I read it in, but somewhere I heard or read this week of talking about how, yes, we all ultimately want to see good happen in the world, even if you have a completely different idea of what that is. And this teacher was saying, someone was saying, well, you need to believe this, to make the world better. He says, well, you mustn't really have faith in your spiritual path or God at all. He says, what do you mean? Of course, that's why I'm telling you. He says, well, if you have to go out and try to convince me that thing you believe in mustn't have very much power, does it? You ever think of that? Like, I believe in this prophet. Well, then why do you have to be out handing out flyers if it is so powerful? So the thing is, we heal by our consciousness and showing up in a different way. Not by banging people over the head. You must believe this. You show up as the bigger person. That's how it starts. So, I have more to say, but I'm done. So, let's just take this within for a moment. That knowing that this thing that we have labeled as the shadow or the dark is our most precious teacher. That we right now challenge ourselves to see the presence of the divine right where this is that we have judged as bad, and we allow ourselves to view it from an elevated state of consciousness. And as we do so, we connect with others who are doing the same. And as we connect with others who are doing the same, we begin the process of healing the world. We don't have to know in this moment how it turns out. Today, we don't have to know what action it is for us to take tomorrow, but we live in that knowingness and faith that healing is present and possible. And that's all we need to know today. So in this knowingness, we express our thanksgiving, and in this thanksgiving, we simply let it go. We release it. We release our human judgment and just let it be. And so it is.